Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy, and I'm glad you're visiting my channel. Here we share new confessions every day.
I never liked champagne. It's too dry, too smug in the mouth. But I held the flute anyway, because that's what you do at someone's housewarming party. You smile, nod, and sip something bitter while pretending it doesn't burn. The place was beautiful, whitewashed brick, arch windows, nautical decor that was just try hard enough to be expensive. It was perched on a hill in Carmel by the sea, overlooking the Pacific, like something out of a Nicholas Sparks adaptation. And it wasn't just any house. It was my grandmother's. My sister, Callista, stood in the center of the living room, one arm slung around her boyfriend's shoulder. He looked like a TV anchor, all teeth and tan. She was glowing, radiating some twisted version of success. Her blonde hair was curled just enough to look careless, and her voice rang out like a damn bell. "I have an announcement," she said, tapping her glass. I should have walked out then. Something in me knew. But I stayed. I watched. She raised her glass like she was delivering a wedding toast. As most of you know, we lost our dear Gran, Adelaide, a few months ago. It was hard for all of us. All of us. Sure. All of us who didn't show up while she coughed herself to sleep. All of us who couldn't be bothered to hold her hand when the morphine made her cry. She went on. But life gives us beauty through grief, and Gran left me the most incredible gift, this house. I don't remember dropping the glass, but I heard the crack. It wasn't loud, just final. Like a note at the end of a song. Someone laughed, nervous, uncomfortable. My hands went cold. This house. My Gran's house. The one where I spoon-fed her soup when she was too weak to chew. The one where I read her Steinbeck until her breath grew shallow. I was there when she died. And Callista? She hadn't visited in 6 months. "I'm honored to carry on her memory here," she said, placing a hand over her chest like some Hallmark heroine. "To continue our family's legacy by the ocean." I couldn't breathe. But I smiled. Reflex more than choice. I walked up to her afterward. Hugged her. "Congratulations," I said. She pulled back, her eyes searching mine, maybe for some trace of bitterness. But I gave her nothing. Then I left. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just me, my coat, and the quiet rage humming in my ribs. The next morning, I called a lawyer. And I told him I didn't think my grandmother ever signed that will. Not willingly. I hadn't spoken to a lawyer since I rear-ended a BMW in college. Back then, I was 20 and terrified, apologizing through tears and overpaying for a scratch that probably wasn't mine. This time, I wasn't scared. I was furious. His name was Elijah Penrose. His office was tucked between an art gallery and a cafe that sold $9 lattes in downtown Monterey. When I stepped into the building, it smelled like lemon wood polish and old paper, orderly, clinical, detached. The receptionist offered me a bottle of water and a smile. I declined both. Elijah looked like someone who had once been a philosophy major before realizing billable hours paid better. Mid-40s, sharp suit, silver in his beard. When I told him what I suspected, he didn't flinch. "You believe the will was forged," he repeated, his fingers steepled. "I know it was forged," I said. "Do you have a copy?" I reached into my tote bag and handed him the manila envelope. I'd printed it from the county probate site the night after the party, my printer wheezing like a dying animal with every page. He skimmed the papers, his eyes narrowing. This was signed just 2 weeks before Adelaide's death. Yes. And she was already on palliative care? She couldn't lift a fork. She barely knew what year it was. He looked up at me then, finally. Like he was seeing a person, not just a case. "And who filed the will?" "My sister. Callista Hale." He gave a short nod and leaned back in his chair. "Rowan, I'm going to be honest with you. Cases like this are hard. Courts are reluctant to overturn wills unless the evidence is overwhelming. You'd need testimony, documentation, handwriting analysis, medical records. It's not a quick win. I don't want a quick win, I said. I want the truth. I want justice. He studied me a moment longer, then pulled out a legal pad. All right. Let's start by making a list of everything you remember from the last few months of your grandmother's life: visits, conversations, medications. Every detail matters. And so I told him. I told him about the time Gran couldn't remember how to open the fridge, how her signature on birthday cards had turned into a shaky scribble. How Callista never came, too busy with her branding clients and yoga retreats in Santa Barbara. I told him about the last Sunday morning, when Gran looked at me with glassy eyes and whispered, "You're the only one left who's kind." Elijah tapped his pen against the desk. That could mean a lot of things in court. It means everything to me. We filed the paperwork a week later, quietly, discreetly. No emails. No calls. Just certified letters sent to the clerk's office and the estate lawyer. Callista didn't even know. Not yet. But soon, she would. Because here's the thing about forged signatures and stolen legacies. The ink doesn't lie. People do. The first time Callista found out about the petition, she left me a voice message. Just one. "Are you insane?" Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, something between a scoff and a threat. Then she hung up. No follow-up. No explanation. Just 4 words laced with the kind of venom you learn to bottle when you grow up in the same house but live in different worlds. I didn't respond. She'd get her explanation in court. Over the next 2 months, my life became a string of appointments, affidavits, scanned documents, and long hours hunched over memory. I met with Elijah twice a week. We brought in a geriatric neurologist who'd reviewed Gran's medical charts. We subpoenaed Gran's hospice nurse, who remembered Callista's face only from a framed photo on the wall. "She never visited?" Elijah asked. The nurse shook her head. "Not once." Then came the handwriting expert, a retired forensic analyst named Miss Eleanor Griggs, who looked like she could dismantle a criminal empire with nothing but a magnifying glass and a cup of chamomile. She studied the signature on the will for almost 10 minutes in total silence. "This stroke pressure is all wrong," she said finally. No tremor. No hesitation. Whoever signed this was confident and steady. She tapped the end of her pen against Gran's known signature, one from an old greeting card I had saved. But Adelaide wasn't steady. Not in her final days. Not at all. I felt my throat tighten. Because I remembered. I remembered holding her hand as she tried to write a grocery list, her letters collapsing into each other like they were too tired to stand. I remembered how the pen slipped from her fingers. How she wept, embarrassed, while I pretended not to notice. Callista had never seen that. She only saw the beachfront property. The blue shutters and the wraparound porch and the guest room she could turn into a meditation studio. She wanted a lifestyle. I had lived the loss. About 6 weeks in, Elijah handed me a manila folder thicker than a paperback novel. "Discovery phase," he said. They had to turn everything over. "You'll want to look at this." Inside were dozens of emails between Callista and a real estate broker in Big Sur, dated before the will was filed. "We'll have the house in my name soon. I'm expecting to list it midsummer. Keep the buyer warm, just in case we go off market." She had already planned the sale. Before Gran had even been buried. Before the ink on the fake signature had time to dry. The hearing was set for September. Probate court, Monterey County. I didn't tell my parents. They'd pick sides. Or worse, they'd try to make peace, try to talk me down with words like family and forgiveness. But this wasn't a sibling squabble. This was theft. Of property. Of legacy. Of the last thing my grandmother had left behind. It wasn't just a house. It was everything she ever meant to me. I wore black. Not for drama, and not for mourning. I wore it because it was sharp, clean, undeniable. The kind of black that didn't apologize. The kind that said, I belong here. The Monterey County Courthouse looked like every building justice forgot, a gray slab with flickering lights and scuffed linoleum. But that morning, it felt sacred. Like a reckoning waiting to happen. Callista arrived 20 minutes late, in white linen and oversized sunglasses. Her lawyer, a man named Trevor DeLay, yes, DeLay, the irony wasn't lost on me, tried to shake Elijah's hand. He didn't. Callista wouldn't look at me at first. When she finally did, her smile was brittle, all teeth and no warmth. I can't believe you're doing this. I said nothing. Because she could believe it. That was the problem. The hearing was procedural at first. Motions, objections, all the legal jargon that made me want to scream into my palms. Then came the evidence. Elijah stood, precise and calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He presented Grant's medical records from the week the will was allegedly signed. Vital signs. Physician notes. A full palliative profile. She couldn't walk. Couldn't swallow solid food, he said, holding up the chart. But somehow she signed 4 pages of legal documentation with no tremor, no errors, and no witnesses outside of the petitioner. DeLay objected. Speculative. The judge, a thin woman with deep lines around her mouth, overruled him with a flick of her pen. Next came the handwriting analyst. Miss Griggs. God bless her brutal honesty. The signature on the contested will is not consistent with Adelaide Hale's documented writing in the last 6 months of her life. In my professional opinion, it is a fabrication. DeLay tried to discredit her. Called her outdated, accused her of bias. She smiled sweetly. Sir, I helped authenticate the Unabomber letters. This is a toddler's forgery compared to that. I almost laughed. Almost. Then they called me to the stand. I told them everything. Not just the legal stuff, the real stuff. How Gran smelled like cinnamon and baby powder. How she'd sing me old Patsy Cline songs when I couldn't sleep. How in the end, she couldn't remember who the president was, but she still remembered my name. How Callista never showed up. Not for Christmas. Not for birthdays. Not even for goodbye. She wasn't there, I said, voice steady. But I was. Every day. Every moment. I looked right at my sister then. Her arms were crossed. Her mouth, tight. She didn't earn this house. She stole it. The room went quiet. Not dramatic TV courtroom quiet. Real quiet. The kind where everyone knows the truth just landed like a stone in the middle of a pond. After 2 recesses and a long afternoon of silence, the judge returned. She spoke slowly, carefully. The court finds sufficient evidence of undue influence and forgery. The will is void. The estate shall revert to prior standing. Legal ownership of the Carmel property transfers to Rowan Hale. I didn't cry. Callista did. She stormed out of the courtroom without a word. No apology. No backward glance. Just heels clicking like gunshots on tile. Elijah packed his briefcase calmly, like he'd known all along. You did good, he said. I nodded. But I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Because justice doesn't always feel like a win. Sometimes it just feels like salt in an open wound. The first time I unlocked the front door, really unlocked it, as its legal owner, there was no one there to cheer, no balloons or congratulations. Just the ocean, breathing steady in the distance, and a key that finally turned without resistance. I stood in the foyer and let the silence settle. The house was still full of Callista's things, coastal chic furniture, yoga mats, an espresso machine she probably used twice. Her energy clung to the rooms like perfume, designer, artificial, fading. I didn't rush to change anything. I just walked from room to room, touching walls I used to lean against during late-night arguments with hospice nurses. Floors I mopped while Gran dozed in the next room. The window seat where I once fell asleep with a book in my lap, listening to her breathing through the baby monitor. It wasn't just a house. It was a witness. To the quiet, to the grief, to the love. A month later, Callista's lawyer sent a letter. Some desperate gesture for mediation or partial compensation. I didn't open it. I dropped it straight into the trash. That part of my life was over. My parents called twice. I didn't pick up. They sent a message through my cousin, "She's your sister." This isn't what Gran would have wanted. But they were wrong. This was what Gran would have wanted. Justice. Truth. And someone who didn't look at her like a burden when her hands shook too much to hold a spoon. I sold most of Callista's furniture. Donated what I didn't want. Painted the kitchen the shade of green Gran used to love, the one she called Spring Leaf. I found her old record player in the attic, cleaned it up, and played Patsy Cline records on Sunday mornings. I turned the guest room into a studio and started painting again. I hadn't picked up a brush in years, but the house, it let me breathe. And slowly, the house stopped feeling haunted. It started feeling mine. Some nights, I sit on the porch with a glass of wine and watch the sun dip below the horizon like it's being swallowed whole. The waves keep coming, crashing, pulling back, like the world never once paused for heartbreak. And that's the thing, isn't it? It doesn't. But I do. I sit. I breathe. I remember. And I let myself be proud, not of winning, but of not becoming like them. I didn't steal. I didn't lie. I didn't fake kindness for a deed. I chose the long road. The quiet one. The one lined with dignity. People think revenge is loud. Explosive. A grand finale. But the best revenge? It's silence. It's peace. It's waking up in a home built on truth. With no one to answer to. No one to forgive. Just the sound of the ocean. And a name on the deed that finally feels right. Rowan Hale.